Wetlands are aquatic ecosystems that are a transition between land and lakes, ponds, or other bodies of water. They are literally wet lands. An easy way to understand wetlands is to take a look at some. There are four main types of wetlands. Marshes are wetlands without trees and lots of grass. Marshes can often be found at the edge of lakes and streams where they form a transition between the aquatic and land ecosystems. Swamps are wetlands that has lots of trees. Fens are wetlands dominated by grasses. A bog is a wetland that accumulates peat, which is a deposit of dead plant material, and often you can find mosses in a bog. Wetlands are very productive ecosystems with great diversity of plants, insects, amphibians, reptiles, bird, fish, and mammals. Wetlands are also very nutrient dense and help with the water cycle and nitrogen cycle. So there we go, wetlands, land covered with water that provides food and important nutrients to the ecosystem.
Water moves quickly through streams and seeps downhill underground. When rainfall is heavy, this can cause flooding. Wetlands are like sponges, slowing the water and soaking it up, reducing its impact and saving homes and lives. Wetlands purify our water. Tiny microbes in plant roots and the soil break down pollutants in the water. Contaminants and sediment are also filtered as they move through the wetland, the soil acting like a sieve. This improves the quality of our water. The saturated soil is also really good at storing carbon, preventing it from being released back into the atmosphere as CO2. And last but not least, wetlands have a positive effect on our health and well-being. Science has shown that calm sounds and sights of water are good for our mental health, and getting out in nature helps us keep fit. These are just a few of the benefits wetlands bring.
Home to some of the richest biodiversity on the planet, coastal habitats have long sustained life in all its forms. Not only are they resource-rich and beautiful, they are natural protection networks. Coastal habitats such as coral reefs, seagrasses, salt marshes, and mangrove forests provide a layer of protection to sustain life today. And by reducing the impacts of climate change, they help protect life tomorrow. Coastal habitats serve many important functions, but one that doesn't get enough attention is their ability to protect us against natural disasters. Much like mangrove forests and salt marshes, coral reefs and seagrass meadows act as a buffer during storm surges and floods, protecting millions of people worldwide and their livelihoods every day. And these habitats don't just protect people, they protect biodiversity too. In the salt marsh, animals rely on the habitat as a breeding ground. Its tall grasses and abundance of food make it a perfect nursery and an important resource for fisheries. The mangrove forest serves yet another protective function. Like salt marshes and seagrass, it is a highly efficient carbon store. The mangrove sequesters carbon, mitigating the impacts of climate change. What's more, its soil can store 3 to 5 times more carbon per area than other tropical forests. But this important habitat is in jeopardy. Unfortunately, as a result of destructive human activity, 50% of all mangroves have been lost in the past 50 years. In fact, while coastal habitats protect us against many threats, they are among the most threatened ecosystems on the planet. If this pattern continues, mangroves and other coastal habitats could potentially disappear in mere decades. But we can help. By working together with country leaders, we can develop policies and secure commitments to protect and preserve these valuable resources. We can step up with other forward thinkers and come together to use these nature-based solutions to fight climate change. By preserving coastal habitats, we maintain natural protection networks for generations to come. In the boundary between land and sea, rooted in the shallow waters, lie powerful ecosystems that sustain people and the planet. Coastal wetlands, like salt marshes, mangroves, and seagrasses, are some of the most biologically diverse ecosystems on Earth. They are shelters for sharks, turtles, and birds, feeding and spawning grounds for a variety of fish species, making them integral to food production. They are powerful places that safeguard shorelines and combat climate change, which is why we must choose to protect them. Coastal wetlands have an extraordinary capacity to absorb carbon and store it for centuries, helping mitigate emissions. Mangroves alone can store 3 to 5 times more carbon per acre than other tropical rainforests. Coastal wetlands can also help us adapt to the impacts of climate change. By buffering coastlines, they reduce the risk of floods caused by storm surge and rising seas for millions of people. But these wetlands are in grave danger of disappearing altogether. In the last century, we've destroyed half of our coastal wetlands, accelerating biodiversity loss and releasing stored carbon back into the atmosphere. This not only contributes to climate change, but leaves us more vulnerable to its effects. But there is a path forward to protect these vital ecosystems. In 2015, 197 parties adopted the Paris Agreement, committing their countries to reduce emissions and build resilience against the effects of climate change through nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. Protecting and restoring coastal wetlands is one effective way for governments to meet these commitments. It is also a critical nature-based solution to help us both mitigate and adapt to climate change. In the face of historic threats, we need to take historic action. It's time to protect our coastal wetlands.
Elsewhere, Yala Swamp within Nyanza region, described as a biological museum of East Africa with thousands of species of aquatic flora and fauna, is on the brink of ruin. The wetland and its satellite lakes is becoming a pale shadow of a once vibrant water body, with blame directed to uncontrolled human activity and the impact of climate change.
The wetland boasts 3 satellite lakes, Kanyaboli, Sare and Namboyo. Once dubbed its jewels due to their huge ecological roles, they play as home to a number of fish species, birds and wildlife and wetland plants. But the swamp is slowly bleeding to its death thanks to uncontrolled human encroachment. The activities of companies like Dominion Farms, which has since stalled, are singled out for the sad state of affairs that has, for instance, seen Lake Kanyaboli, the largest oxbow lake in the region, face severe degradation.
We didn't know by that time what the importance of the Elder Swamp at that time. But then we formed a group, tukaanza championing for the conservation.
The degradation and the human activities is on the rise, and also it's being fueled by the urge that we need to destroy wetlands.
They are burning the swamp. After burning is when they cultivate. So the degraded areas are big.
The wetland has a huge potential to generate revenue and safeguard the livelihoods of the local community.
We have the bird like the shoebill. Shoebill was found here, but it migrates to the Uganda part. Nowadays, Uganda, they are selling shoebill, only one bird for ornithologists. And international visitors are going in Uganda to only to see one bird, shoebill. And it was here.
There are rare species of animal, Statunga and the rest, that used to inhabit there, but they're no longer there now. The birds that used to also use that was at the nest, so that bird watching could be done in there. This Yala Swamp could be a very rich place also in tourism, ecotourism, but the counties and national government have not invested in it.
Worried by the ongoing situation, various conservation efforts are being put in place, and the Kenya Wildlife Services has stepped in to declare the lake a national reserve, which will see proper land use to curb wanton degradation.
In land use plan, there is a clarification for every sector. We have the specific place for conservation, and we have the specific place for private developer, and we also have the specific place for community, for cultivation. The gazetted area is 41.42 square kilometer. They gazette Lake Kanyaboli as a national reserve because they want community to be involved in conserving that aquatic antelope.
The government should come out clear and make sure that any activity that is happening in the swamp, within the swamp or within the catchment area, should follow the protocols.
It is a move towards ensuring that the local community appreciates the wetland as a resource and not a marshland to reclaim.
The Kenya Crane and Wetland Conservation Project, under the African Crane Conservation Program, works to conserve the endangered grey crown crane on the rapidly declining wetland habitat. With most of these wetlands situated in unprotected community lands, we work in close partnership with farmers as key stakeholders and crane custodians.
Kainutik chekekurenon kityo Arap Saina, mising kainutik chenootin eng kokwoni Kamitei komostab logging wall keboisie ak grupit nekikure Emgwen Central Youth Group. Kikinam boisioni kong'ete kenyitab 2013 keboisie kobo ribetab ainosiek ak beek ak kong'onyik. Kibo kenam boisiet ak timit age nekikure Kipsaina. Kongoi. Amache ale akine kongoi amu korutocho konyo ukilo. Alen atestai akiligei ak asome biikab nganasani sikobit ketes kerib ketik ak kerib ainosiek. Asikotesak beek kokararanitu beek koyo koker ainon nemitei nguno korenyu koek kokwet tugul. Asa mising yo kemeut. Akotesak taritik cheu kong'onyik. Kongoi kunoto.
This windmill on the other side of the swamp was once used to pump water for the community here in Dome village, but it is no more after the drying up of the swamp. Residents of Dome depend on this private solar-powered well for the water for the domestic use and livestock. Esther Mwirori, a resident of Dome, told us they are forced to queue for hours to get water.
Watu ambao wanasafa hapa ni wengi sana, na pia kuna wenye hawataweza kupanga hii laini, kwa hivyo inabidi wanatumia maji chafu ambayo wanaitoa mbali sana.
Once it gets to 4 p.m., they are forced to wait until the following day when there is sufficient sunlight to power the solar panel in order to pump water. After the destruction of the swamp, conservancy owners have also adversely been affected.
Wildlife is suffering, especially like elephants. They need water, they need to drink a lot of water. So you'll find they'll be all concentrating on the areas where there's a small amount of water.
The year 2017 witnessed the invasion of conservancies by herders with their thousands of livestock from Samburu, Isiolo and other counties in search for water and pasture, leading to killing of 6 elephants and lions and other animals in a week's time. This was seen to have been connected to lack of water downstream. Early this year, the government ordered the gazettement of Wasonarok Swamp to save it from extinction.
We have already started moving people out of the swamp. Once we are clear with the county government that water can be abstracted and reach people outside, we are going to move all of them out, and then we can gazette that.
Wetlands, which cover 6% of the world's surface, provide range of environmental services, including water filtration and storage, erosion control, a buffer against flooding, nutrient recycling, biodiversity maintenance, carbon storage, and a nursery for fisheries, among others. But drainage and destruction of these ecosystems is responsible for a large amount of carbon emissions, equivalent to 40 tons of carbon per hectare per year for drained tropical swamp forests, as well as degradation of other services they provide. Ewasonyiro River is estimated to be 700 kilometers long from the point it joins River Wasonarok. But for a long time, River Wasonyiro has been declining after being affected by human activity in its catchment areas, leading to the drying up of its lower part. Water levels in rivers Liki and Nanyuki that originates from Mount Kenya and rivers Suguroi and Mutara from Aberdare Ranges that feed to a Wasonyiro River are rated to be very low due to over-obstruction of water upstream and degradation that has led to the drying up of a Wasonyiro River. The situation is so bad that obstruction of water for farming is seen taking place as high as 4,000 feet inside the moorland on Mount Kenya. Effects of deforestation that was taking place before a ban on logging was effected in the year 2018 can still be felt, and it will take a long time for water levels to increase in the rivers.
Juzi imenyesha Mount Kenya. In one day, all the rivers were flooded. Inatuambia kuna shida, sababu mapema ilikuwa inanyesha wiki mbili, wiki ya tatu ndio tunaona mito zinaanza kufurika.
The effects of obstruction of water upstream now can be felt in Samburu National Reserve, with wildlife and livestock being worst affected by lack of water in River Ewasonyiro.
Watu wajitolee, hata stakeholders, watu wa lodges, watu pia wa county government, both county government na Isiolo county government, waweke nguvu kwa hii mto. Tuhakikishe kila wakati wanyama wetu wanapata maji.
We traveled more than 370 kilometers from Archer's Post, where River Ewasonyiro has dried, all the way to Lolian Swamp in Wajir County, where the river is supposed to be flowing to. The once 196-kilometer long and 25-kilometer wide swamp years back is now a pale shadow of its former self. Elephants and other wild animals once quenched their thirst here, but not anymore.
There's no more Lorian Swamp. There's no water. That area has been grazing land for a lot of pastoralists. Habaswein and a sub-county, a very big sub-county, just south, lacks water. History has it that Habaswein kids used to swim in the Ewasonyiro River, but that is no more.
Yusuf Noor, who took us to the swamp, told us that he had come from Somalia, where he moved his livestock after the drying up of the swamp in search for water and pasture. We came across these herders too on their way to Somalia to look for pasture and water for their livestock. This is what remains of the aquatic life that thrived here years back when the swamp had life.
The issue of riparian land and issues of crackdown can be done, then that issue could be solved.
No one is allowed to take water without following the laid down procedure, simply because they are at upstream. The person who is at downstream is equally entitled to the same water.
Farming in catchment areas, over obstruction of water, planting of indigenous trees, organized land use and awareness are some of the things that must be done to address the situation. Apart from climate change, many swamps across the country are on the verge of extinction due to human activity, which if not addressed soon, its effects will be felt by generations to come.
Scenes such as these are not new to Kenyans. Whenever it pours, the blame always goes to the government for not doing enough, and sometimes even the investors, but never the people who continuously encroach on wetlands.
That flooding happened because the rivers had nowhere to go. The wetlands where they are supposed to go to have been encroached by buildings and whatever they may be.
Wetlands are clearly defined in the Ramsar Convention as areas inundated by water, usually about 6 meters and below. The areas either have water all year round or part of the year. The problem comes in that part of the year when there is no water, since people mistake them for dry land or even wasteland.
We need to sort of demarcate, well, not demarcate, I'll say inventorize our wetlands. Which are the wetlands? And make it known to people.
But even for those who are aware, the need to make more money far outweighs the importance of conserving riparian land. Take the building behind me, for example. The owners are involved in a series of court cases stopping the county government from bringing it down. The irony is that those same court orders stop construction from going on the same site. But as we speak, construction is almost complete. Then there is the other extreme. More than 20,000 people and close to 100,000 heads of cattle in Tana River risk starvation following a severe drought that has caused water shortage in the Tana Delta. Some of that shortage may be caused by diversion of the river flow and infrastructural projects in the area.
That wetlands policy needs to be implemented the way it's supposed to be.
7 villages in Asa location are hardest hit, and the residents have been left to rely on only 2 wells as humanitarian crisis looms across the entire county.
To the untrained eye, there appears to be countless sloughs, marshes, and small ponds scattered across the prairie landscape. But this appearance is very deceiving. Wetlands in this part of Canada have been reduced by as much as 70 to 90% in just the past 40 years. Mostly they've been drained and plowed under to grow crops. But this practice is also contributing to serious ecological and social impacts throughout watersheds. Wetlands are invaluable to the maintenance of healthy water supplies upon which all life on Earth depends. So what needs to be done to ensure that they are adequately protected and restored?
We were an area that was probably under-equipped for the kinds of water that came to us. There was people that were stranded in their homes, they couldn't get out. We don't have a creek here even, so the thought that we would be flooded out in town was almost unimaginable. The biggest challenges that we have are things that are beyond our control, and certainly one of those is the events of the last 4 years. And the causes of those, I guess, are open to debate. Climate change is being talked about as one. I do believe the aggressive drainage policies that have been allowed to happen in other areas.
Manitoba in particular was facing significant flooding concerns on the Assiniboine. It was brought to a point with the 2011 flood, reinforced by the 2014 flood, which was a rainfall event. I think part and parcel of the problem has been the fact that we being the agricultural component, want to move volumes of water off our land in a big hurry in the springtime. But we're not pointing fingers at any one area or one jurisdiction.
People for the most part don't see the bigger picture. They're worried about their own farmland, but they don't stop to consider the impact of multiple people operating on that premise. So you get multiple people worried about just their farmland, and by the time you get to downstream, you've got a big impact.
We've lost a substantial amount of wetlands in this province, but even throughout the world. And without really understanding, exactly what they're doing for our water supplies.
Landowners are kind of long-term minded people, and they're looking down the road, so any improvement that they can make to their farm base this year will pay off in subsequent years. So there's a strong motivation and strong market indications or forces that are telling them to act in a certain way.
But I've got some areas that my father drained many, many years ago that right now there's a 55 bushel canola crop per acre sitting on that land. And right next door to it is a pothole or a wetland that we've chosen to leave there, and it doesn't generate any income. So it's economics. The value of farmland has escalated, and when you buy a quarter section, there's 160 potential acres there. The drive is very real to produce as much as you can off those 160 acres.
The revenue that's left on an acre at the end of the year is getting smaller and smaller. So that's what makes the farmer need more acres.
Much like the rest of agriculture, we've seen technology advance in leaps and bounds with regards to drainage. There was a time when you went out and eyeballed the situation as best you could, and you went out with a 1.5 yard scraper, and you very patiently dug a ditch, and eventually some of the water moved off the land. Now we've got everything from LiDAR to laser technology to computer simulations to essentially automated ditch diggers that do that job for us. We've got various machinery companies that sell software packages to their customers along with the tractor and the scraper to do the job. It's so much easier now to do that type of work and do it much more effectively that's in large part why it has progressed. As with most things, progress is not always in everybody's best interest. Take a look at what the floods of 2011 and 2014 cost society and what they continue to cost society. As you drive down the roads in southwestern Manitoba and look at the number of bridges that have been replaced, for example, look at the number of sections of highway that have had to be replaced, the number of culverts and so on.
About $20 million we think probably would be the cost for this two-border area.
We're seeing more and more of our tax expenditures going to infrastructure repairs and things.
Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba have recognized the need to toughen drainage regulations and to enhance protection for existing wetlands. But until these regulations are in place and properly enforced, the pressure to drain wetlands will continue.
Increasing the fines may deter some people, but I think some of the farms are large enough now that they would see that as a cost of doing business.
The really good thing about the regulatory structure that is being put in place in both Manitoba and Saskatchewan is that there is a component there of no net loss, indicating that we will do our best to facilitate drainage when it makes sense, but will also require producers to make sure that they've got a one-for-one trade-off in terms of creating wetlands at the same time.
But the policy that many conservation groups would like to see instead is no net loss of wetland benefits, which wouldn't necessarily be a one-to-one ratio.
I think we need both incentives and fines. So you've got some incentive to pick up the people that are willing to do the right thing, but the fines are there to try to catch some of the people that don't see the benefit of trying to be good stewards of the land.
There are many farmers out there that would be happy to hold water if they were adequately reimbursed. And I think that people that live in urban areas have got to realize that they share this problem with us and they're not insulated from it. So if they expect farmers to take arable farmland and have it hold water, there has to be some kind of process that pays them for that.
Keeping the wetlands benefits society, and why should a farmer carry all that on his financial back?
If there's a need to compensate the agricultural community for helping to protect water supplies, then that's fair.
We've got to find a way to store that water on the landscape and slow down the release. That leads to the issue of both wetlands preservation and wetlands reconstruction. Providing some monetary return to producers for initiating those projects on their land is one more piece of the puzzle, one of the tools that will help us move forward.
So what are some of the ecological services provided by wetlands that could be the basis for some form of incentive or payment?
The wetlands kind of act as the kidneys of the water system. Slowing the water down on the landscape and allowing it to re-assimilate back into the vegetation is a really simple and straightforward way of cleaning our water.
We're losing a lot of natural ability to clean and filter the water that runs off of landscapes. So we're losing that ability to retain nutrients, retain sediments, and to help maintain and sustain our water quality.
The end results of the whole drainage system at Lake Winnipeg and the algae blooms there, and I get in trouble, and I keep saying it's a good thing that we have these algae blooms in Lake Winnipeg, or otherwise we wouldn't do sweet nothing about it.
There are algal blooms in many, many lakes, and so it's not simply a Lake Winnipeg problem.
Talking to the urban dweller about the economic return to the producer for draining a piece of wetland doesn't carry much weight, but talking to them about the impact of improper water management on their beachfront carries considerable weight.
While removing nutrients that promote algal blooms is an important service provided by wetlands, there is another vital function that often goes unnoticed. Wetlands are critical to maintain groundwater pools called aquifers. By holding water in one place for prolonged periods of time and allowing it to soak in. A great many people on the prairies depend upon aquifers for their drinking water.
The vast majority of the jurisdictions within the basin utilize groundwater as their source of potable drinking water, and to date very little activity has taken place on that front.
We don't see what's happening under the ground, and So someday it's going to turn on the tap and there won't be any water there because we have not recharged the aquifer. And I guess when there's no water in the tap, then we'll realize what the value of water is.
Although the wetlands are swollen right now, there will be times in my future where we're in a drought situation and you'll rely on those wetlands for advantageous stock watering situations or just the diversity of plant life that those wetlands allow to occur.
Wetlands, without a doubt, are key elements in providing habitat, biodiversity. We fail to understand just how important they are. Things are becoming more variable, more insecure, and that's because we're losing our environment. All those parts of the environment that lead to stability and sustainability. And so that's our choice.
If it's a choice, what then needs to be done to protect and restore wetlands across the prairies? Certainly, more funding to adequately monitor and enforce regulations and to support payment for ecological service programs would be extremely helpful. But fundamentally, a shift in thinking is needed. Wetlands should not be thought of as wastelands, nor can water and drainage be managed solely on a local basis. A broader, more holistic approach is needed, an approach that is called Integrated Water Resources Management. It is thinking like a watershed.
Well, again, there aren't any easy answers to a very complicated issue, but what needs to happen is to begin the dialogue. Far better to engage people in discussion about the broader concept of water management across the basin and move towards looking at drainage as a component of that water management.
It's a very intricate system, this wonderful prairie pothole region, and to see it destroyed like it has been is, it's hard.
A Ramsar site is a wetland site designated to be of international importance. These wetlands are protected under strict guidelines of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, also known as the Convention on Wetlands, is an intergovernmental treaty for the conservation and wise use of wetlands. The convention, signed in 1971 by UNESCO in the Iranian city of Ramsar, is one of the oldest intergovernmental accords for preserving the ecological character of wetlands. Over 170 countries are now party to the Ramsar Convention. There are over 2,400 Ramsar sites around the world, covering over 2.5 million square kilometers. Wetlands are among the world's most productive environments. These are areas where water is the primary factor controlling the environment and the associated plant and animal life. Wetlands provide a wide range of important resources and ecosystem services such as food, water, fiber, groundwater recharge, water purification, flood moderation, erosion control, and climate regulation. They hold high concentrations of birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and invertebrate species. However, they continue to be among the world's most threatened ecosystems owing mainly to ongoing drainage, conversion, pollution, and overexploitation of their resources.